Hi there, this is Kathy with Be Creative with Kathy, and today is Monday, August. Can you believe it's August already? August 3rd. This is my slider pop-up card, and I call it that because when you slide it out, it pops up like that and then sits on the disc. So let me tell you first, a lady by the name of Linda Parker made this card back in 2016, and she used the baby bear stamp set and made the really cute baby card. And I'll try to find that YouTube video if you want to see it, but it's a great card, and I kind of adjusted the measurements a little bit and turned it into this card with the jar of flowers. So let's go ahead and get started, and I'll try to tell you card or stock measurements as we go. I have my cheat sheet here from my blog that has all the measurements, so hopefully I can. We're going to start though with a piece of cardstock here that is thick whisper white, and it measures 5 3/8 by 4 1/8, and then it's scored down here at 1 1/4. And I have a piece of designer series paper here. This is from the Tasteful Touches designer series paper. I don't know if that's the exact name, but that's the bundle it goes with. And this is 4 inches by 3 7/8. So almost a square, but it's gonna go right there on my thick whisper white cardstock. So I'm gonna take my seal it here and just slap that down right there on my thick whisper white. Try to get it straight. Oh, that's pretty good. Okay, another piece of paper I have here. This is 9 1/4 by 1 1/8. And this is going to fit right underneath that score line on this piece of paper here. And I'm going to use some Seal It Plus because it's a really thick, or strong I should say, adhesive. And I'm going to just cover down here, not going too close to the edges here and here because there's a very small border of this piece between those two. And I'm going to try to center it as best I can just by eyeballing it. I guess you could get a ruler out and try to measure it, but I'm going to adhere it down there underneath that score line of my thick whisper white cardstock. Okay, then with the hole punch, this is a 1 1/2 inch hole punch. I'm going to try to center it here and not quite half of my hole punch, and I'm going to punch through those two pieces of cardstock. So now your piece looks like that. Okay, we'll set that aside for just a second. I'm going to bring in a piece of early espresso. Now this is just a quarter sheet of cardstock, so it's 5 1/2 by 4 1/4. And I have a piece of whisper white. Let's see how big this one is. This whisper white is, oh, maybe I don't know the size of this whisper white. Oh, no, it should be, yep, it's 4 inches by 5 1/4. It's just a perfect layer on that piece of brown early espresso. So we're going to lay this down. Try to get it straight and our borders about even. Like that. I got something gritty on my paper. Okay, and then we're going to set this on top here. So now we covered up that piece of white. There's the white that we put on the early espresso, and then we're going to set this piece about where we want it. And I'm going to fold these around the edges as tight as I can around there. So it's like if you've ever done a belly band card, it's like a belly band, and we're going to wrap it around so it meets back here. Now we don't want any adhesive on the early espresso cardstock, so I'm going to take my Seal It Plus, and I'm going to put a little bit of adhesive there and a little bit of adhesive over here on this strip, and then adhere this piece to this white piece. Like I said, no adhesive on the early espresso. So we'll hold that down, and it looks like that. Right, so now we're going to take that early espresso piece out, and we're going to finish punching this half hole here. Now the reason we had to do it like that in 2 sections is because I didn't want to break our punch trying to go through 4 sheets of paper, or at least 1 thick Whisper White and those other, but this is what it looks like when you're done. And that's just to save your punch from trying to go through so many layers of cardstock. Okay, so let's make sure it's back in there, and we know that that's, and sure it's going to go back in there. It will, trust me. There we go. So now it's going to look like that. Now we need to do just a little bit of stamping. So I'm going to set that aside. I'm going to stamp. This is just a scrap of shimmery white cardstock. And I'm going to bring in our stamp set, which is the Jars of Love. I decided I want to use this bunch of flowers here. So I'm going to mount that stamp and have it ready. We're going to need the jar, the tall jar, so I'm going to mount that too. Then we're done there. For our greeting, I'm going to use the itty bitty birthday, and we need It's Your Birthday, so I'll mount that one. And we're also going to need the happy birthday stamp from here. So I'm going to go ahead and mount that. Now this one, I'm going to mount it toward the top of the block, and I'll explain why later. But I'm going to make sure it's up here, so it's not in the middle of my block, it's toward the top. And we'll set that aside. So right now, bring in my Stampin' Pierce mat, because I'm going to stamp with the photopolymer stamp. I just have some Memento black ink. And I'm going to stamp that right here on that Shimmerette cardstock. Okay, now I'm going to set that aside, let that ink sink in and dry, and I'm going to bring the jar in. This is just a scrap of Seaside Spray cardstock. It's one of the new, well, it's not the new in color, it's last year's in color that carried over this year. I'm going to stamp that down just in the same Memento black ink. I'm not applying a lot of pressure, but I'm holding it firm so that ink can sink into the paper. Like that. And then the last thing we're going to stamp for right now is we're going to stamp, I don't need this anymore because we're going to use red rubber now. I'm going to stamp the It's Your Day right here. And I'm going to bring in a scrap of paper so I can practice one time, and some espresso, early espresso ink. So I'm going to ink that up and just practice once here. That looks pretty good, because really I want it to stamp the first time perfect right here. And I'm going to hold that, let the ink sink in. Boom. I'll take that. That's nice stamping. Okay, I'm going to put my early espresso away for later, but we'll use that again in just a minute. Let's go ahead and punch out our jar. This is the coordinating punch that goes with that stamp set. Let's see, I cut my paper. I did get a little small with my paper, but that's right. We'll just, there we go, move it around a little bit in there. Try to get it so it looks straight, and punch out that jar. Okay, so while we're still waiting for our Whisper White to really dry, let's go ahead and assemble some more of the card. So here's 3 other pieces of thick Whisper White cardstock. This one, this is the one we're going to start with. This one is 3.5 inches by 1 inch, and it's scored down here at a 1/2 inch. So I'm going to put some glue, and I'm going to use liquid glue so it's nice and strong. Although I could use this, let's just use the Seal It Plus. I think it'd be just as easy. So I'm going to put some Seal It Plus then on that tab right there below the score line. And then I'm going to put this right up against this score line here Oh, I got ink on the back of my paper, but I don't think it's going to matter because it's the back, thank goodness. Okay, I'm going to set it right there so it's centered in that half punch that, or that hole punch that we punched out right there. I'm going to take this out so I can work with this piece there. Do you see how I have this right up against that score line? And then when you fold that score line on the 3.5 inch piece, it goes like this, just like that. Okay, so now let's bring in this little piece of paper. Now this is thick whisper white. It is 1.5 inches by 1/2 inch, and it's scored at 1/2 inch from either side. And we're going to fold that so it looks like a C. I'm going to put a little bit of Seal It Plus on one of those tabs. Now it went over the edge, but look, I can just fold it over onto itself. And I'm going to lay this piece at the bottom of the score line of the 3.5 piece. Let me lift this up so you can see what I'm talking about. So it looks like this. And this one's the one that goes up and down, and this one is right there. Okay, then we're going to put some adhesive on this tab here and hold that with this finger, but then close your card this way and rub that, get that nice and adhered to your cardstock. Now when you open your card, it looks like this. So you can close it and you have this piece. This is your pop-up piece, and it goes up and down just like that. Right? Okay, so let's take this piece. We're going to put this back in. Now we need to adhere this one to the back of the card. Boy, I got mine in there tight, but it's going to work better that way because it holds up the paper when you're all done. Okay, so there's my card. Now I'm going to fold this one forward, and this piece is another piece of thick white cardstock. And let's see, this piece is 2 3/4 by 1 inch, and it's scored at both ends at 1/2 inch. And this time I'm going to use the liquid glue in case I need to move it around a little bit. But I'm going to take, well, first I want to do this. I want to score like a Z. Fold those scores like a Z. Okay, and then I'm going to take and put some glue. Really, and I should have folded them back and forth, but I'm going to put glue on this top tab here, and about 1 inch from the top of the white cardstock, I'm going to glue it down about, not 1 inch, 1/2 inch. Try to get it centered in there and straight, and I'm going to glue it down. Does that look about 1/2 inch? Right there. Just glue that piece flat. Okay, and then on the tab down here, I'm going to just put another little bit of glue like this. And then when I lay this piece down, I'm going to make sure that it's centered on that brown espresso cardstock, and then apply pressure down here and let that glue adhere to the back of the card, if that makes sense. I hope that does. Because then when it's stuck good, you can see it looks like this. Can you see that? So then when you place your thumb here and your forefinger here and you pull, you have the pop-up. Ta-da! Okay, so let's go ahead and stamp the inside of our card. So I'm going to pull this back pretty far. I'm going to bring in that happy birthday. That, remember, I took the stamp and I mounted it toward the top of the block. That way when I stamp my happy birthday, it doesn't bump into this. And I want to make sure that my happy birthday is high enough up that you won't see it through the circle when the card is closed, or down, I guess you would say, but yet it's not too far, so when you pull the card, your happy birthday appears. So I'm going to guess, and let's bring in that scratch paper. Let me practice one time just to make sure. Okay. And then I'm going to just stamp it right there. Ta-da! Maybe it's a good stamping day. Okay, put the ink away. We're all done with that. Now let's bring in our jar of flowers here. I'm hoping that ink has set in and is dry, because now I'm going to bring in my colored pencils. Now normally, if you use Memento ink, you should use the Stampin' Blends. And with the pencils, you probably should use StazOn, but since I'm using a photopolymer or a clear stamp, I don't like to use the StazOn because it stains my stamps, not that it hurts them, but it's just not my favorite thing to do. So I'm going to color carefully. I have my colored pencils here, and I'm going to kind of just scribble some color onto my flower. And this is Daffodil Delight. Now in my box of colors, Stampin' Up! Has 2 assortments of colored pencils. This is both the colors just thrown in my box there. But after you've scribbled your color on there, and you see I didn't do a very good job at all, then you take your blender pen and you can smooth that ink and get it in the corners. I'm going to have a light touch so I don't smear that black. And just smooth that color around on that big tulip. Now, when you need to clean, when you're done with your blender pen, and you need to clean it because you need a clean blender pen before you do the next color, you just take a piece of scratch paper and you scribble until it runs clear again. Let me do it with a different color that's darker. That might be easier for you to see. So if I was going to do, I think this is Cherry Cobbler, yeah, a little bit darker color. I'm going to scribble on my flower and then just smooth it around with my clean blender pen. And then you would clean your blender pen in there, that's better, you can see, until it's clean. And now your blender pen is stained, but yet it's clean. Then I would take this and I would fussy cut it out, which just means you cut close to the lines, and I would have something like this. Ta-da! Okay, so let's adhere these to the card. So I'm going to take and cover this strip here, and I'm going to avoid the edges just so it doesn't gush over my the sides, I guess you'd say. And I'm going to just put a little bit of liquid glue, a little bit goes a long way, and put that right there. I'm going to set my flowers, I want my flowers behind my jar, and just hold them together like this, and at the base or at that score line I'm going to just set them down like that. Now they're adhering to that 3.5 inch piece that we had popped up back there, so it looks like this. Let me see if I can, there, can you see how now it's adhered to that piece back there, and it looks like that. Is that not adorable? I love this card. Okay, so now I have about 9 inches of the white crinkled ribbon, I think it is called, but I'm going to just tie a simple bow. And just kind of tinker with it a little. Oh, I got a little bit of green ink on my bow. Let's see if I can hide that in the back. And where did green ink come from? I bet you I had dirty fingers earlier when I was making my other card. Okay, but that's okay. Then I'm going to take a pair of scissors. Now my scissors, I have a pair of scissors that I only cut ribbon with, and I've marked them with a little piece of ribbon here. And because the paper dulls your scissors to where if you save a pair for ribbon, they cut like butter. And there's my little bow. Bring in a simple glue dot. I'm going to stick my bow right there on my glue dot. Pop that off with my scissors, and then cover that little seam so you can't see where the jar and the flowers connect, and it looks like that. So let's see how it works. So when you hold it here and pull up, you got that pop-up with the surprise birthday underneath. So I guess we should thank Linda Parker for the video she did back in 2016. and because I love her card and her idea. Now, if you like this card idea and you want to order some products, please visit my online store. If you want the measurements for this card, you need to visit my blog. If you do decide to place an order, please use this host code. I really appreciate you watching. I hope you have a great week. We'll see you here back on Friday, and I'll show you how to use some bleach to make some cards. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.